As a shoot 'em up fan, I was always excited to see new consoles hit the market because they were often among the best looking games you could find. When the 16-bit machines appeared, we got drop-dead gorgeous shooters that were orders of magnitude more impressive than the generation before. When the Sega CD hit the North American market in 1992, I was eager to see what she could do with the genre, especially with the considerable boost in processing power it had over the standard Genesis. More on-screen enemies without slowdown maybe, or perhaps some new background tricks using the system's sprite scaling and rotation capabilities. Believe it or not, most shooters were quite tame on the Sega CD at first. Soul Feast wasn't anything special visually, and while Robo-Alest is a personal favorite of mine, I can't say it broke any barriers in visual superiority. But in October of 1993, Game Arts and Sega dropped Sylpheed on the platform, and oh my was it spectacular. In this episode, we are going to talk a bit about how it looked, how it played, and what it meant to Sega CD owners as a showpiece for the hardware. I hope you enjoy Sylpheed for the Sega CD. The origins of Silpheed can be traced all the way back to the NEC PC-88 line of 8-bit computers. It used polygons for its ships that allowed a sort of third-person vertically scrolling engine that had an impressive level of depth. This was 1986 after all, and we didn't see this kind of thing too often. That game was then ported to other computer platforms over the next 3 years, including a DOS version that you are seeing right here. Game Arts, intent on bringing the game to the Sega CD, wanted to essentially remake it with some big upgrades to the visuals. The story remains similar to the original and is your typical shooter tropes about Earth's defense systems getting hacked by a new enemy and only the prototype Sylpheed squadron has a chance to stop it. From there you begin shooting down wave after wave of enemies that come at you from a slightly top-down, third-person 3D perspective. This creates an interesting case of enemies starting out small at the top of the screen and getting larger as they move towards the bottom. This perspective acts on your ship as well, with you getting smaller the closer you get to the top. As enemies come out, you are faced with 3 ways of taking damage. 1 is taking enemy fire, 2 is direct contact with enemy vessels, and 3 are the items and weapons popping off in the background. To combat this, you have a shield that can take numerous hits before your ship is destroyed. Even once the shield is gone, you can take a few more shots that damage your weapon systems and engine before you turn into a ball of fire and are looking at the title screen again. There are also power-ups that drop score and shield replenishment bonuses on you, aiding your cause and helping you through the tough times. Unlike most shoot-em-ups of the era, there are no weapons procured in the field. Instead, your weapons are granted to you based on your score and added to your arsenal in between stages. Every 40,000 points you gain a standard weapon that is equipable before each stage. These are your typical directional based blasters as well as a homing shot. Every 50,000 points of score gets you an option that can be used a limited number of times. This includes a graviton bomb that can stop bullets, a shield that absorbs damage, a heat-seeking volley of torpedoes, and an area of effect antimatter bomb. Each option is effective in different circumstances and is limited by the meter on the left-hand side of the screen. That meter can be replenished a bit as you destroy your enemies. Stage 1 always starts you out with the default main weapon and no options at all. When Sylpheed dropped in 1993, it was a stunner. The Sega CD had been searching for its showpiece title, and boy did this one fit the bill. That's not to say the platform didn't have good-looking games before this, it's just that this one sat apart from the rest as something truly jaw-dropping, and something a Genesis cartridge at the time could never have done. While the polygon ships moving to and fro were cool, the real star of these visuals are the pre-rendered cinematics and the video backgrounds. Just wow! This was roughly 2 years before the Saturn and PlayStation began regular releases in the West, and not even the 3DO or Jaguar had really gotten going yet. To see this at home was incredible, and made you feel like your Sega CD was the most powerful gaming system on the planet. We had seen full motion video games before, but Game Arts had made a title that kept traditional gameplay while using the video to actually add some visual punch you simply didn't see outside of CD-ROM based technology. It really was one of the very first instances where the Sega CD had something unique due to its tech, while retaining a level of gameplay beyond the usual QuickTime events that littered the full motion video genre. The cool thing is that many of these backgrounds weren't just pretty window dressing. Those asteroids flying at you could hit you. Those laser blasters and bombs going off could damage your shields. You had to know where to be on the screen so you could safely navigate it. Sylpheed also had some of the most impressive cinematics of any pre-32-bit title. Long, swooping shots of the ships and their armadas were something to behold. It really was top-shelf stuff. Even today, I get all warm and fuzzy watching it play out. As much as I loved how Sylpheed looked, I was sorely disappointed in its sound. The musical selection is just so incredibly underwhelming for what's happening on the screen. Considering this is a CD, it's even more of a letdown, particularly since there are Genesis shooters out there that have far better soundtracks. You may feel otherwise, so let's have a listen and see what you think. So, was Sylpheed the ultimate CD-ROM showpiece for Sega's expensive add-on? In many ways it absolutely was. I know all my friends were absolutely blown away by it at the time, and so was I. I even did a project on it at school explaining how polygons were set to revolutionize the gaming industry. Seeing stuff like this, even in its simplest of forms, really made an impression on you about how the next generation machines would change everything. But like a lot of things on the Sega CD, the technology was only the tip of the iceberg, and while you could see promise, the end result was still less than stellar. For all its gorgeous cinematics and killer backgrounds, Sylpheed was still at heart a very simple shooter. So simple in fact, it's nowhere near the better games at the time. Without a power-up system that you could change during the gameplay, things got boring pretty fast. And since all your weapons and options were based on score, you didn't see some of them until the game was damn near finished. Boss encounters were also extremely disappointing. While ships in the backgrounds were huge and imposing, the actual boss ships at the end of the stages were little more than regular enemies that just soaked up a lot more damage. I also personally had a ton of issues with enemies and their weapon fire getting lost in the chaotic full motion video in the background. This resulted in me taking damage from things I never saw coming, or being hit by things in the background I didn't know could hit me. That was a problem way back in 1993 that has only gotten worse as I've gotten older. Now that I'm 46 and my reflexes aren't what they used to be, I don't mind telling you that Sylpheed absolutely destroyed me during this review. I was never able to beat the game without cheats back in the day, but I was always capable of seeing the 9th or 10th stage before my continues ran out. But here today, I struggled to see more than the 5th stage without any cheats. I'm not sure how much of that is the game itself just being hard as nails, but I can tell you this, it sure wrecked this old man's skills like I had never touched a shoot 'em up before. Sylpheed is the rare example of a stunning piece of software that you just can't help but to want more from. The visuals were state-of-the-art among 16-bit shooters at the time, and the best example of how full-motion video games should have evolved. But strip away the candy coating and Sylpheed has real problems as a game trying to hold your attention. The weapon system isn't particularly interesting, the boss fights lack any intensity at all, and the brutal challenge will beat down all but the most dedicated. Even with its shortcomings, you still gotta play this one though. The mix of polygons and full motion video really stood out as one of my favorite games to fire up when friends were around. It was the type of thing where you played it as much to look at it as anything else. I think even now it retains some of that magic and really shows off early CD-ROM tech quite impressively. It of course doesn't touch what we eventually saw on the Saturn and PlayStation, but it was a rare Sega CD product you couldn't play on any other platform. Game Arts would go on to make many more fantastic games on Sega's platforms, but a Sylpheed sequel would not be among them. I would have loved to have seen the series evolve into a Radiant Silvergun-like experience with a radically improved weapon system and full 2-player support. Funnily enough, I had always considered Radiant Silvergun sort of a spiritual successor to Sylpheed, and when it did finally get a sequel on the PlayStation 2, it was Treasure that worked alongside Game Arts to make it happen. But the original will always hold a special place in my heart. It's not a perfect game. Hell, you could even argue that it's not a good game in some respects, but it was a title that made you proud to own a Sega CD. A title that showed you something you simply couldn't get on any other 16-bit platform. And while that may not mean much today, back then, it meant everything in the world to me as a gamer. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.